So, yeah, I'm Liam, and I've taken the questionable career move of undertaking a PhD. And sometimes I wonder if that was the right option for me, because I hear a lot of people say to me, you shouldn't just be wasted doing a PhD here in this office. But it turns out what they were actually saying is, you need to stop turning up to the office wasted during your PhD. So when people ask me what my research is about, I usually find it easiest to illustrate with a really bold, relatable example. And that is that everyone in Britain hates immigrants. Okay, we hate how they come over, take the shelter. We hate having them in our back garden. But most of all, we particularly hate their long, bushy tails. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about human immigrants, no. I'm talking about immigrant squirrels. So we've seen grey squirrels come over from the US, and the good old British red squirrel is dying out. And we think this is because the greys are taking all the resources. And now they're absolutely everywhere, and this is why all British people hate them. But it turns out that's not actually the case, no. Because it's not about resources, and it's not about the government subsidised 3-bedroom dens. And we need to educate these groups like the ADL, the Acorn Defence League. Because now we know that there's a virus called squirrelpox, and that seems to do nothing in the greys, but is absolutely fatal to the reds. And this is really what my work is all about. Racial tension in animals. No, but I'm interested in how viruses move from one species to another, and then what happens afterwards. So this means that on a daily basis I'm confronted with the pleasures of such decisions as whether vomit is classified as an excretion or a secretion. The upside, of course, is that if I'm on public transport and I don't really want to have random chat with a stranger next to me, when they ask me what I do, I simply say, oh, I work in infectious diseases, and then cough very loudly. And they can look a bit concerned at this point, so I reassure them by saying, no, it's fine. The overseas hospital I was just stationed at totally stocked up on herbal remedies. And very soon I'll find that I have the whole carriage or cabin to myself. And if I'm really lucky, when I get off the flight, they might put me in special accommodation, totally free for a whole month. But no, in actuality, I don't do anything with viruses in a lab, so rather I use computer models and simulations to try and work out what viruses are going to jump into humans next. And we make these models based on actual information that people send over to us about real outbreaks happening now. So it means that I'm probably the only person who gets excited when Gmail says, this attachment may contain viruses. But this kind of modelling work is really important. So there's a group in Canada that have been modelling how a condition spreads that affected nearly every teenage girl between the ages of 12 and 16. And that is Bieber fever. Yeah, they actually modelled the fandom of Justin Bieber using the same principles as transmission of disease. And terrifyingly, it turns out to be 8 times more transmissible than flu. So if you ever do get the urge to sing Baby, in the interest of public health, please think twice and keep your mouth shut. And it might sound silly, but actually we're using this kind of work to tell us things about how highly transmissible diseases like measles move around the world. So ultimately, we're using this to stop... We're using this to stop one of the most destructive little parasites on the planet, in addition to stopping measles. This is just one area. Well, this is one area where I've found that disease biologists have a strange or even sick sense of humour. So another thing is chickenpox. So the virus that actually causes chickenpox can get into the eye. Now this really only happens when we see patients with suppressed immune systems, so you don't need to worry. But when this disease happens, it's called progressive outer retinal necrosis. Or, and I'm not making this up, The acronym PON. Who knew that your parents were not kidding when they told you that porn will literally make you go blind? So, talking of visual impairments, I actually used to work on how bat viruses jump into humans. So bats we think are the source of a few things like SARS, but also Nipah, which you might know from the film Contagion. But yeah, that actually happened. This virus went from bat to pig to human. We're pretty sure we've worked out now how it got from pigs to humans. But we're still trying to work out how it got from bat to pig. So this means that I honestly had to read a 10-page report on whether pigs would eat bat shit. And it turns out, and I quote, the 3 pigs avidly consume the fruit bat excrement. Which is not really the ending to the fairy tale that I remember. But yeah, like Contagion, people often get quite scared about disease and they can use all kind of preventive measures at home, you know. You've got that woman, dermatologists hate her. Now I thought people were pissed off at me, but to have a whole field of medicine hate you. But actually it's worse than it sounds, because doctors hate her, and nurses hate her, and scientists like myself also hate her. And the reason is she pops up every other fucking webpage we're trying to look at. Her face just appears on my screen and I'm like, do you mind? I'm trying to look at progressive outer retinal necrosis. But actually, I'm no stranger to using preventive disease measures myself, because I get bacterial infections in the back of my mouth, which means that I have to use a certain special toothpaste. And quite impressively, this toothpaste manages to taste worse than the bacteria. But don't take my word for it, because the product itself will actually tell you that after 14 days of using Corsadil, most people liked its unique taste. That's not liking it, that's Stockholm Syndrome. That's like if Subway were to have the tagline, most people can tolerate what we pass off as sandwiches, after being forced to eat nothing else for a fortnight. Now I actually once swallowed this stuff accidentally, which gave me a feeling in my stomach later that day that I can only really describe as minty fresh hellfire. And obviously I chose to do the sensible thing and decided not to leave the office discreetly, no, but instead to just stay at my desk retching. But the actual retching causes the infection in the back of my mouth to rupture. So I end up head down, all manner of fluids spurting out of my mouth. And instead of coming to my aid from my colleagues, I hear a silence for a few moments and then, Now I wonder if that's an excretion or a seed. I will leave you with that mental image for the rest of the evening, maybe the rest of your life. Thank you very much.
By a sneeze. That's why Outbreaks Club is the best. Have you enjoyed yourself tonight? Yeah!